Ignite is insane because you get so many multipliers and don't even need to scale crit. Throw fireballs to blow up packs of enemies, use Matadeira to drop a meteor from the sky which inflicts a dot that'll burn bosses to death, and apply oil to your enemies so they take triple damage. This is the fastest leveling build I've played so far, but as a heads up, you do need the Cursed War DLC and a save file with a Journey of Nightmares and all skills enabled. So with that, let's get right into it. After the tutorial run, there's 2 skills you want to unlock, the first being Holy Fire. You throw a fireball which explodes, dealing area damage and inflicting a pretty nasty ignite. In addition, you unlock Matadeira. This causes a giant bombardment to rain from the sky, dealing massive damage on single target, and leaving behind an area of effect that ignites enemies for a duration. In addition, you'll want a movement skill. And there are 3 options: Shadow Dash, Passage, and Karkara Dive. In terms of scaling, Karkara Dive is your best option. It's fire, and it has an area of effect that can ignite enemies. But in a lot of the footage you're going to see me using Passage because I like how it's instant. Last up, as you level, you're going to want to add 1 more supporting skill. This will come after you drop the Poem Never Recited unique Exalted Relic, where enemies affected by your slow time or judgment become oiled. This means any fire damage ignites them, and the ignite deals its damage 3 times faster. 3 times the DPS, but ignite also falls off much faster, so you'll need to hit them again to reapply it. So which of the skills should you use? If you happen to drop a Death Notary, I recommend Slow Time. That way, enemies within the slow time take an extra 30% damage. Unfortunately, enemies tend to like to move out of slow time, so if you want something a little bit more responsive, that also comes with the slight upside of debuffing enemy resistances, go for Judgement. Just keep in mind that there are going to be a bunch of blessings that lower enemy physical and plague res which aren't useful to you. And in general, you want less skills on your bar, so until you drop a Poem Never Recited, you should stick to your movement skill, Matadeira, and Holy Fire. Next up we have the Great Bell. This is a system that evolves as you play and progress. The first thing you should do is take the base damage, path through the Soulstone gain, grab the red portal, this way you can skip levels you've already cleared, making progression faster, increase your reliquary size so that you can equip more relics, and increase time on the Hell Clock timer. This makes runs a bit more forgiving. From there, path all the way down to increase your maximum skill level. This is a sizable damage bump. You should take skill level whenever possible, and reliquary size. And yes, the pattern's going to continue that as you beat Act 1 and unlock Act 2, you unlock skill level and reliquary size, and the same thing happens after you unlock Act 3 by beating Act 2. Along the way, look for additional mechanics to pick up, such as the 4th Blessing, Second Wind, which is a cheat death effect, so if you find yourself dying, take this early. If you don't find yourself dying, take it when you start dying. And Blessing Banish, which you could use to, say, banish that pesky Plague Fizz Shred on your Judgement. Now when it comes to relics, your options in the early game are going to be fairly limited, even with all skills enabled. But try to find a Crimson Sword. This causes your fireball to release additional projectiles after it explodes. These are quite good for clear and igniting additional enemies. Plus for single target, it is 30% multiplicative ignite damage. In addition, of course, you want the Poem Never Recited. You need 1 source of oil, and this is the easiest way to get it in the early game. Also, if you happen to drop a Crimson Flower, that's very good. Just keep in mind you will need to change your gear slightly if you're using it. Beyond that, look for Grand and Exalted Relics with life or fire damage, large relics with fire damage, and small relics with defensive stats. You can also keep an eye out for beneficial rare affixes, like marksman skills deal additional damage to close enemies. This doesn't scale your fireball, which is a spell, but it does scale your Matadeira. That said, your priority on relics should be getting a bit of fire damage, a bit of life, and the Poem Never Recited plus Crimson Sword. When it comes to gearing, prioritize damage on your weapon. This is the most important thing in both Act 1 and Act 2. Beyond that, look for defensive stats like life and resistances. Grab movement speed on boots. Now if you're using Crimson Flower, it's important that you avoid getting a left ring with high crit chance. You don't want to be dealing critical strikes. So try to find a left ring that does something like gives you life leech or even gives you bleed chance. It's better to have an item that does nothing as opposed to an item that is actively detrimental. If you don't have Crimson Flower, don't worry about this, grab the crit, it doesn't really matter. As you're leveling, prioritize damage on Matadeira and Holy Fire. On Holy Fire specifically, you can either get damage or ailment damage. Direct damage means the hit and the explosion. Ailment damage means the ignite it leaves behind. So in this case, the plus 20% damage, that's the direct hit. And realistically, you want a little bit of both. On Matadeira, your main option is damage. Now if you're using Judgement, also keep an eye out for fire/lightning resist shred intensity. This makes it easier to lure enemy resistances so they take more damage from your ignite. Prioritize blessings for your main skills over that of your supporting skills and especially over your movement skill. For Blessing of Foundation, I recommend starting with Blessing of Force. Take the Fire, Lightning, and Plague damage version, then the Elemental Ailment Duration. This will lead to Ignite damage and Ignite duration. Again, if you have Crimson Flower, avoid Blessing of Precision, since this forces you to interact with crit chance. If you don't have Crimson Flower, you can totally go this route, go crit damage, and get the projectile damage bonus, as that's a pretty good way to scale the build. After you complete the Blessing of Force, go for life to give yourself a bigger health pool, or go for movement speed so that you can more easily avoid enemies. It's a matter of personal preference between the two, and it depends a little bit on how much life you have on your relics. The playstyle is simple. As you're clearing, throw Holy Fire into packs of enemies. This will cause it to explode, releasing more fireballs. It should also kill most of the enemies with the direct damage. As you're doing so, try to zigzag a bit. Don't move in straight lines. Now, if you have decent gear, you can deal with most rares the same way. But if you come across a particularly tanky rare, let's just pretend this guy is, cast Judgement, then drop Matadeira. This will do massive damage, as you can see it just one-shot that enemy, and inflict a huge ignite, which should cause the tanky enemies to burn to death within a couple seconds. Remember that ignite is dealing damage 3 times faster, thanks to the oiled effect. If you don't have the oiled effect, weave in some Holy Fire casts instead, and wait for Matadeira to come off cooldown. If the enemy moves out of a puddle, you'll need to recast it, dropping another meteor on their head. So here's another demonstration with a boss. I just put this down, oil them, and they die almost instantly. This is the setup that I used to clear Act 1. After that, it took me 3 runs to clear Act 2, which is the minimum, a single run for Act 3, which actually continued from that final Act 2 run, and 2 runs, again the minimum, to clear Act 4. So let's take a look at the setup that I used to finish the campaign. Before I jump ahead though, a quick reminder, if you're finding the video useful, get subscribed, turn all notifications on, that way you don't miss an upload. And hey, why not leave a like while you're down there? It really helps me out. In Act 2, you unlock the Constellation system, and you want to advance the Path of Fury. This gives you access to bonuses for fire and ignite damage. And so to begin with, you're starting on Ogham. Technically, this is more of a melee-focused starting point, but that doesn't particularly matter here, as you need the Fury Devotion to unlock the main fire damage constellation. As you can see, without it allocated, nothing. With it allocated, the constellation is unlocked. As you continue your progression and get more constellation points, a really good investment is the Ignite damage node here, because it is 20% multiplicative. You can also look at nearby defensive nodes, such as St. George or Jurupari the Judge. For damage, you're going to need to invest a little bit more by filling out Expeditus. This gets you more Discipline Devotion and unlocks Yababello. Filling her out then gets you even more Discipline Devotion, unlocking Logan Eddy. The reason you can invest this way is because both of your main skills share the projectile tag, though this certainly isn't the only way to build your character. And I'll get into that more in the endgame video that's coming out soon. Now, as you continue your progression, there's a few things to look out for. The first is an Ignite damage ring. This will go in your right ring slot and add quite a bit of damage. In addition, Small Coffee is a big boost to your single target damage. Book of Sin is nice to have, but certainly not required. It auto-casts Judgement while you clear. That said, you still need to hardcast it for single target, so eventually you're going to want to replace this. Teriri's Law increases Ignite damage. Also, killing enemies attracts loot to you. I highly recommend using this as it's a big damage bump and very nice quality of life. There's also Charred Figurine, which boosts the damage of your Holy Fire in exchange for firing less projectiles, and Feathered Bracer, another nice to have that you certainly don't need, but it means that your Karkara Dive instantly recovers its cooldown when you're hitting an enemy. Outside of unique relics, look for either Emberborn, i.e. ignite damage rare affixes, or Flaming, where enemies take additional fire damage when they take ignite damage. Both of these are big DPS boosts. I wasn't lucky enough to get one until the end game, but damage versus ignited and oiled enemies is also a good option. Though personally I think at the early stages of the game, it's a little bit behind the first two that I just mentioned. If you happen to find an elusive relic, this can be a good way to get some free evasion. Remember, Matadeira counts as a marksman skill. Last up, you may drop a Black Silice. This is an interesting one, because it causes your Holy Fire to drain life on cast. So if you don't have enough life regen or life leech, you cannot use this. But it gives Holy Fire a damage bonus based on your missing life. So if you end up having a large life pool, and you're hovering around 50 to 70% a lot, as long as you're not in danger of dying, this does add damage. However, it's pretty hard to play around during the campaign, so in general, I recommend avoiding it. Aside of the Constellations, skill swap, and new relics, not that much changes with your build. You're still fireballing enemies and dropping big ol' meteors for single target damage. Since this build is high damage, even with low investment, I recommend focusing more on your defenses. Cap your resistance, get some evasion or endurance, and get as much life as possible. That way you can face tank enemies and progress smoothly through the campaign and into the endgame, including Abyss and Oblivion. Gameplay-wise, very little about your build changes as you move into Acts 2, 3, and 4. You're still going to be primarily clearing with Holy Fire, you're still going to be using Matadeira to kill anything that survives your fireballs, and you're still going to be using Judgement on more dangerous enemies like bosses. Once you have Book of Sin, it's a little bit easier because Judgement is automatically cast as you go around killing enemies, so plenty of elites get Judgement anyway. You can also pick up things like Ignite damage rares that bump your damage, or Teruri's Law, which not only bumps your damage, but attracts all loot with no limitations. Definitely grab at least one of those. Matadeira becomes incredibly forgiving here. You usually only need one charge to kill an enemy instantly, and you're going to have 3 charges thanks to Small Coffee. Just remember to prejudge stuff if you're dealing with a single target boss. And because the setup does so much damage, I highly recommend that you focus on your defenses. Get more life, cap your resistances, maybe even add more movement speed. If you do all of this, you're going to end up with a way comfier experience than if you just make your character into a glass cannon to literally one-shot bosses. And even if you don't focus on the glass cannon route, bosses are only going to live for a couple of seconds anyway, given that your ignite is boosted by the oiled. Now, whether it's in Hellclock or any other game, I'm usually not that good at leveling, because I tend to get distracted, so I might do something like walk into Act 3 without res cap, because I was focused on all the cool relic interactions, forgot to cap my res. Then I die. This build made me feel like I was good at leveling. It was super fast. Took a couple runs in Act 1, partially because I was experimenting with stuff, and partially because, well, it takes a couple runs for the build to come together. But after that, I blasted through Act 2. I think I could have done it in one single run if the story allowed you to do that. Act 3 I did in one single run, the one that you're automatically thrown into when you finish Act 2. And Act 4, if it allowed it, I could have done in a single run. So, absolutely ridiculous build, and hey, it's a blast to drop meteors from the sky. In terms of future plans for the build, I may end up going the Ignite Matadeira route, min-max it, or I may end up swapping over to a Skyhammer build. I guess you'll just have to get subscribed and see where this ends up, as this time I wanted to make the endgame version of the build a separate video. With the past couple of videos, I covered both leveling and endgame all in one build. For this one, I wanted to do something different, in part because I might just respec it to Skyhammer, so it's not really going to be an Ignite build anymore. To be clear, I'm not considering doing that because I think Ignite is bad in the endgame, just because I want to play Skyhammer. That said, if I don't get a T4 Skyhammer drop, probably just going to stick with the Ignite. On the other hand, if you're looking for more Hellclock content, I have a build for Tupa's Wrath, which is one of the new DLC skills, and Plague Minion Splitshot. That one is exclusive to the Journey of Nightmares, so if you haven't already done so for 2.0, you will need to make a new save file, but it doesn't require the DLC. Also, it is super strong. Almost as good as this build at leveling, and then just ridiculous in the endgame. Probably going to get nerfed in the future. But in terms of other stuff, I've got a Patreon if you want to support the channel, and I have a Steam Curator page if you want to keep up with everything I'm playing. Those will be linked down below. For now, thank you very much for watching to the end. I'm glad you've enjoyed. See you in the next one.